Clerk will
designate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Micah of Florida.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman and members of the House, I have this amendment and I have several others. I'm going to combine my remarks to this amendment and one of the other amendments to expedite this process. I'm very pleased that the previous amendment to take money out of administration, TSA administration, which I believe is extremely bloated, and putting it into, again, the private screening partnership program, that successfully passed. So with that passing, I had a second amendment to take a similar amount to put those funds into the Transportation Security Support and Intelligence account. Okay, so what's Micah doing here? Ladies and gentlemen, we've created this multi-billion-dollar bureaucracy that has been unable to connect the dots. Here is almost every terrorist incident. We'll put this in the record. The TSA failed every single time. They have never connected the dots. We need to be putting the money not into this huge screening bureaucracy that hassles veterans and little old ladies and children, and you've seen it all. We have created this unbelievable this detriment to the American right to fly and be a free citizen. And you can't, and it's so difficult to get this darn thing under control. But I'm telling you, the money needs to be going into security. When Mr. DeFazio and I helped create TSA, the purpose was to connect the dots. So I would move money out of administration. They have 4,000 to 5,000 people just within a mile or two of here doing nothing, most of them making on average $104,000. Someone told me who just left there were 4 secretaries in their office making over $100,000 apiece. Do the math. We only have 457 airports in the country. That means you've got about 17 people in administration out there and about 9 in Washington in administration overseeing this program. It's totally out of control. So the Micah amendment that I'm going to ask to withdraw in just a second would take money out of administration, put it into connecting the dots in security. I know that's a dumb idea. Then the other thing, too, is the staff has done a great job here. And in some of the report language, there's good report language, but TSA is thwarting the intent of Congress to allow honest competition of the private screening partnership program. We never intended to keep this all bureaucratic. Only Bulgaria, Romania, and Poland have a similar screening model as the United States today. And what they've done is they've packed each of the private screening operations with huge bureaucracies left in place. In San Francisco, somewhere between 60 and 85 TSA administrators most of them are making in the $100,000 range and don't have a job. How'd you like that position? Kansas City, 51 they left there, private screening. They don't need these positions. They leave them there to jack up the cost to try to make private screening look more costly. So while you have language, again, in this bill, and it's good language, we need to hold TSA accountable, to stop cooking the books, give us honest accounting, and then let the natural process of evolution to private screening under federal supervision, you don't do away with TSA, and then finally getting TSA and Homeland Security to concentrate on security and intelligence and connecting the dots to stop the terrorists before they ever get to the airport or get to screening. So with that, I'd ask unanimous consent to withdraw my amendment, and I'll work with the committee. We'll finalize better language to get this done.
Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn.
Yield back.
Who seeks time? For what purpose does the gentlelady from Tennessee rise?
I move to strike the last word and enter in a colloquy with the chairman.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When Congress was created, when it created the Transportation Security Administration in 2001, we defined TSA screeners in law as federal security screeners. Their role, as defined by the Aviation and Transportation Security Act, is to screen passengers and luggage at airports across the country. However, beginning in 2005, TSA administratively reclassified TSA security screeners as transportation security officers and proceeded to upgrade their uniforms to reflect those of federal law enforcement officers with metal officer badges. My concern, and those of many of my constituents, is that despite their appearance, TSA officers do not have any federal law enforcement training to reflect their current title and appearance. This can be confusing to the traveling public as they interact with TSA officers at airports and now on the highways, rail stations, ferry terminals, bus stations, and other mass transit facilities across the country. I strongly believe that Congress has an obligation to ensure that the title and appearance of federal employees properly reflects their training and background. Until we are able to pass the legislative fix to correct the TSA's administrative decision, we need to use the power of the purse to ensure that TSA screeners are not abusing the current perception that they are trained federal law enforcement officers. I would like to commend Chairman Carter and committee staff for their due diligence and dedication in working with my office to address this issue. I am pleased that we were able to reduce screener uniforms by $18 million, a 20% decrease, so that we can continue to monitor this issue. I look forward to continuing to work with Chairman Carter and his staff moving forward on finding a permanent solution. Yield back.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I share her concern that this implication that these are law enforcement officers is a concern that anyone who's ever dealt with law enforcement officers should be worried about. So I thank her for working with us and explaining to us her concerns. I don't want anyone to be out there fooling the public into thinking they are trained law enforcement officers when they're not. And so I think that's an important thing at every level of law enforcement. Representative Blackburn brought this to my attention, and she brought it to the attention of the committee last year. We appreciate her staying on top of these issues. In fact, I asked the staff to look into this matter earlier this year. As a result, this bill cuts, as she's described, the screeners' uniforms by $18 million, about a 20% decrease. In fact, this bill calls for a net decrease of $387.5 million to TSA, or 8% below the FY13 enacted levels. Finally, the committee has directed TSA to provide a report describing a detail of how TSA is complying with the Buy American Act and provide Congress with a total number of uniforms and screener consumables purchased in fiscal year 12 and 13. Moving forward, we will continue to work with the gentlewoman from Tennessee to ensure TSA screeners are not abusing the perception that they are officers of the law, and we credit her for shedding light on this issue, and I thank her for bringing it to the attention of the committee. I'm willing to work with the gentlewoman in any way she chooses.
Thank the chairman. Yield back.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks time? The clerk will read.
Page 18, line 23, Surface Transportation Security, $108,618,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2015.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the remainder of the bill through page 35, line 10, be considered as read, printed in the record, and open to amendment at any point.
Is there objection to the unanimous consent request? Without objection, Intervening amendments to that section? Hearing none, the clerk will read.
Office of Health Affairs, $123,425,000. Federal Emergency Management Agency, salary and expenses, $914,795,000.
For what purpose does the gentlelady?
He's asking me.
Continue to read.
And local programs, $1,500 million.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
I have an amendment at the desk, Mr. Chair.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Brownlee of California, page 37, lines 7 and 10. After each dollar amount, insert reduced by $97,500,000, increased by $97,500,000.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise today to offer an amendment to the fiscal year 2014 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill that will provide $97.5 million for the Port Security Grant Program. I offer this amendment in conjunction with my colleague and friend, the gentlewoman also from California. I represent Port Hueneme, a critical West Coast commercial port and home of Naval Base Ventura County. The presence of the naval base makes the port a potential target of those who seek to do our nation harm. I believe we must do more to protect Port Hueneme and other ports across this great nation from potential threats. The Port Security Grant Program is a critical component of our strategy to protect our nation's critical infrastructure against risks associated with potential terrorist attacks. The vast majority of critical U.S. maritime infrastructure is owned and/or operated by state, local, and private sector maritime industry partners, which is why this state and local grant program is so critical. The funds that the program makes available to non-federal entities are intended to improve port-wide maritime security risk management, enhance awareness, support training and exercises, and support port recovery capabilities. Grant recipients must use funds to address vulnerabilities in port security and support the prevention, detection, response, and recovery from attacks involving improvised explosive devices and other non-conventional weapons. My amendment simply ensures that the Port Security Grant Program will be funded at $97.5 million, which is at the same level as the previous fiscal year. This program is a critical homeland security initiative for Port Hueneme and Ventura County and ports across our great country. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
Thank you. Chairman, I'd like to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to urge support for this amendment that I'm co-sponsoring with my good friend from California, Congresswoman Brownlee. This straightforward and simple amendment will keep the Port Security Grant Program funded at last year's levels and ensure it is protected from further cuts. U.S. ports remain one of our country's most important economic engines as they link our nation to the rest of the world and the global economy. Each day, our ports move both imports and exports totaling some $3.8 billion worth of goods through all 50 of our states. And according to the American Association of Port Authorities, the U.S. port industry supports 13.3 million jobs and accounts for more than $649 billion in personal income. That's why I co-founded the bipartisan Congressional Ports Caucus with my good friend Ted Poe from Texas in order to ensure that Congress recognizes the vital role ports play in our national economy and the importance of keeping them competitive and, most importantly, secure. Despite their growing importance, ports have failed to garner the attention and the resources that they deserved. During my very first Homeland Security hearing, I asked Lee Hamilton, the Vice Chairman of the 9/11 Commission, what should Congress be doing to improve security at our nation's ports? He responded by saying, my judgment would be that we have not focused enough on our ports. For instance, despite a peak funding level of $400 million as recently as 2009, Congress has decreased funding for the Port Security Grant Program nearly every year since. This is despite the fact that ports remain extremely vulnerable to attacks. According to the Congressional Research Service, a 10 to 20 kiloton weapon detonated in a major seaport would kill 50,000 to 1 million people and would result in direct property damage of $50 to $500 billion and indirect costs of $300 billion to $1.2 trillion due to trade disruption. And while an attack of this magnitude may seem unlikely to many Americans, experts agree that a major attack at one of our nation's ports is more likely than ever before. Just last week, in a discussion regarding the likelihood of a nuclear attack at a major seaport, former DHS Undersecretary Jay Cohen stated that it's not a question of if it's going to happen, but rather a question of where, when, and to what magnitude. As someone who can see the Port of Los Angeles from my backyard, this statement provides a sobering reminder that we must be doing anything and everything we can to guard against this threat. The port complex of L.A. Long Beach is responsible for approximately 44% of all the trade that comes into this country. If an attack were to ever occur there, it would be economically debilitating not only for my district, but for the entire country as well. This amendment will ensure the Port Security Grant Program maintains last year's funding and will protect the program from any further budget cuts. By appropriately funding this program, we'll allow our port operators to continue to increase their capability to prevent, detect, respond to, and recover from chemical, biological, nuclear, and other non-conventional attacks. And while ideally I would like to see this program return to its previous authorized level of $400 million, ensuring this critical program is protected against further cuts is one of utmost importance at this time. Therefore, I urge my colleagues to support this incredibly important amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, while I have concerns with carving out funding amounts for specific grants, I will accept the amendment. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. Had something that happened to me many, many years ago as a young lawyer in a hearing at the Port of Houston. I was told by the Coast Guard that every day, this was back in 1968, every day 2 ships pass in each other in the Port of Houston, and should those ships collide, just the mixing of those 2 cargoes would explode and kill every man, woman, and child on the Texas Gulf Coast, all the way to Corpus Christi. That's without a nuclear weapon. We're the largest petrochemical port in the United States. I too am concerned about our ports, and I'm very, very concerned that they could be a target of attack that could cause great damage both in structures and in human life. So I join my colleagues from California, and I will accept this amendment.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I too rise in support of the amendment, which would simply require a funding floor for the Port Security Grant Program at the current level. I very much appreciate the gentlewoman's intent with this amendment. Our seaports are critically important to our nation's economy and therefore have been a primary focus of our security and preparedness efforts. Because our bill does not currently allocate state and local program funding among the major Homeland Security grant programs, I do have some concerns with carving out funding for one specific program. But the funding level which our colleague has proposed is equal to the amount allocated to ports in 2013 and that we anticipate would be available in 2014. Therefore, I support the gentlewoman's amendment and urge its adoption, and I yield back.
Back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Swalwell of California, page 37, line 7, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $97,500,000, increased by $97,500,000.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we learned anything about the Boston Marathon bombings, it's that real threats still exist against our homeland from outside actors motivated by outside forces with great access now from readily accessible materials that they can get on the Internet and can become radicalized also on the Internet and can target us here at home with IED devices. I rise in support of my amendment, Mr. Chairman, which would require that at least $97.5 million of the $1.5 billion provided to the Federal Emergency Management Agency for state and local government homeland security grants would be used for mass transit security programs. These programs are listed on 1E on page 38 of the bill, and the main FEMA and Department of Homeland Security mass transit security effort is their Transit Security Grant Program. I want to start by thanking Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee Chairman Carter and Ranking Member Price for the increase in funding for the account that funds local grant programs for security and terrorism readiness. I organized a letter signed by 39 other members of Congress asking for funding that is sufficiently robust for TSGP, the Transit Safety Grant Program, to be able to meet our needs for mass transit security. Chairman Carter and Ranking Member Price listened to our request, and more money will be available for this critical security program. Now, while the FEMA state and local grant account funds a variety of homeland security initiatives, my amendment addresses the critical, if often overlooked, element of mass transit security. Mass transit, which mostly includes bus and rail, is used by millions of Americans every year. In fact, according to the American Public Transportation Association, there were over 10.5 billion passenger trips in 2012 alone. That amounts to over 28 million trips per day. We're fortunate in the East Bay of California, which I am privileged to represent, to have an excellent bus system and the world-famous Bay Area Rapid Transit System, also known as BART. There were over 400,000 BART passenger trips just this past April. Unfortunately, some of what makes mass transit so great, that it can be easily accessible and carry so many people at such quick time through critical urban centers, makes it vulnerable to terrorist attacks. In June 2009, the Government Accountability Office, GAO, summarized the issues facing mass transit, writing the following. According to the Transportation Security Administration, transit officials and transit experts, certain characteristics of our mass transit systems, such as multiple access points and limited barriers to access, make them inherently vulnerable to terrorist attack and therefore difficult to secure. High ridership, expensive infrastructure, economic importance, and location in large metropolitan areas or tourist destinations also make them attractive targets for terrorists because of the potential for mass casualties and economic damage. Just 2 months ago in April, a plot to target trains in Canada was thankfully disrupted before anybody was hurt. And, of course, everyone remembers the horrible London attacks from 2005 and the Madrid transit attacks in 2004. No American in any part of our country on any of our mass transit systems should live in fear of a mass transit attack. And damaging mass transit in our key urban centers wouldn't only harm that particular area, but it could ripple through our nation's economy. Transit security, Mr. Chairman, means economic security. Everyone has an interest in protecting our public transit systems, and that's where TSGP comes in. Through TSGP, local mass transit systems receive grants to protect and minimize damage from terrorist events. Example uses include surveillance training, public awareness campaigns, detection equipment, security cameras, and the hardening of infrastructure. The continuing resolution for fiscal year 2013 provides a floor of $97.5 million for mass transit security, before sequestration of which $10 million was reserved for Amtrak. My amendment would use that same number, and since that bill before us is based on sequestration levels already, that would amount to an increase in the floor for fiscal year 2014 over fiscal year 2013. To provide such broad discretion for the Department of Homeland Security is important. However, I also understand the argument that the Homeland Security Secretary should be able to distribute money based on risk and potential harm. I know some members may feel we shouldn't set minimum amounts to be spent out of this account. And to provide such discretion is important, but it ignores our constitutional responsibility to provide clear direction on how the money is spent, and it risks certain priorities being ignored. Moreover, the Transportation Security Grant Program is a competitive grant program, and so within that framework, money still would only be distributed based on risk and damage potential. Last Congress, minimums were included for this account when a compromise was developed with the Senate, including for transit security. I'd hope the same thing would happen again. My amendment gives this House an opportunity to state now on the record that we value mass transit security. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose, the gentleman from Texas rise?
Last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm willing to accept this this amendment. Once again, I show the same concerns as my colleague, Mr. Price, about the carving out of funding amounts for specific grants, but I will accept this amendment.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of this amendment, which would simply require a funding floor for public transportation security assistance and railroad security assistance at the current level. Appreciate the gentleman's intent with this amendment. This public transportation infrastructure is absolutely critical to the functioning of our economy, and therefore is and must be a primary focus of our security and preparedness efforts. The same reservation applies to this amendment as to the previous amendment. We do not currently allocate state and local program funding among the major Homeland Security programs. So we have some concerns with carving out funding for specific programs, but the funding level proposed here is equal to the amount allocated to transit in 2013 and that we anticipate would be available in 2014. Therefore, I support the gentleman's amendment and urge its adoption. And yield
gentleman yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The clerk will read.
Page 40, line 20, firefighter assistant grants, $675 million to remain available until September 30th, 2015.
Clerk will suspend. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin, amendment by Mr. Polis of Colorado, amendment by Mr. Hecht of Nevada, amendment by Mr. Garcia of Florida, amendment by Mr. Deutsch of Florida. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic votes after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
This afternoon, the House has been debating the second of the 12 fiscal year 2014 spending bills. Yesterday, they approved the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs bill. Today, debating the 2014 Homeland Security spending bill. A series of amendment votes here. This first one by Gwen Moore of Wisconsin. This was a 15-minute vote. The remaining amendment votes will be 2-minute votes. And during this series of votes, we expect them to swear in the new member from Missouri, Jason Smith, who won the special election yesterday, filling out the House to 435 members. That should come up during this series of votes on amendments to the 2014 Homeland Security spending bill. And they won't finish work on this today, likely finish it up tomorrow. For some details on what's in the bill, we spoke earlier to a Capitol Hill reporter. Tim Starks is with CQ Roll Call, joining us from Capitol Hill. What does this 2014 Homeland Security spending bill say about the priorities of House Republicans who wrote the bill?
I think it says that the Homeland Security is still one of the bigger of the priorities for the House Republicans. It's a $39 billion bill. It is something that the administration has complained while they are basically comfortable with the funding level, they don't like that it comes at the expense of domestic programs.
What are some of the specific programs and agencies funded by the Homeland Security bill overall?
The biggest ones are, say, the border security agencies, Customs and Border Protection, and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. The Coast Guard is another very big one. Because of disaster aid, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is another of the biggest. And then from there, you start seeing the Transportation Security Administration. You start seeing Secret Service, and it gets a little smaller as they go down that way. You
said the bill's $39 billion. How does it take into account or deal with the automatic spending cuts, the sequestration cuts?
It does take them into account in the way that some of the other bills do so far. This bill would actually be above the current level, assuming sequestration is going in the past year as well. So it's a raise from last year based on what's happening with sequestration in the current fiscal year.
What about some of the hot-button issues that are coming up or likely to come up during the debate over the bill?
Well, you know, grant funding is always a pretty popular topic. I think we'll see something on that in a few different ways, actually. There are some programs that are controversial that we might see efforts to end funding for that say track illegal immigrants or that detect behavior in airports, because those are programs that Democrats have worried are making use of racial profiling. You know, the bill also bans funding for visa immigration applications from Brazil. You know, there might be an effort to end that. Those are some of the bigger issues in terms of things that we might see fights on. The other issues have kind of been resolved from the hot button issues have been things that the administration proposed that the Republicans said no to, things like an airport security fee increase or deeper cuts to the Coast Guard than Republicans were comfortable with.
What about Democrats? Broadly, what are some of their overall priorities in this spending bill?
You know, they've been reasonably happy with this bill because you know, it gets in the ballpark of what they would like the top line to be. Even though they, like the president, they share concerns that it's going to come at the expense of some other programs. You know, I think, like I mentioned, the grant programs are particularly popular with Democrats. You know, the Homeland Security grant programs, things like fire grants, firefighter grants, any kind of public safety agencies, and any grants they need for Homeland Security. And then some of those programs that have been a little controversial with Democrats as they pertain to civil liberties kind of concerns.
You mentioned White House displeasure over some elements in this House bill, this Republican bill. They've issued a veto threat. So what does the White House want to see out of the Senate bill? What do they want to see come out of Congress?
You know, there are some specific things that were put into this bill that are put into the bill pretty regularly. Things like efforts to make it harder for them to close the Guantanamo Bay detention facility that they're upset about. They want to see the Brazil language that I mentioned come out. They're upset that the Republicans keep putting back in language requiring a certain mandatory minimum number of detention beds for immigrants, illegal immigrants that have been captured. And you know, I think what they'll probably get some of what they want from the Senate, but you know, there's some Senate Democrats who feel similar about some of those programs that the House Republicans do. I think, you know, in terms of what the Senate might do that would be different, you know, there might be less funding for the facility in Kansas that would study agricultural diseases. There might be more funding still for the Coast Guard than even the Republicans put in to counteract what the president was proposing reducing.
Tim Starks is with CQ Roll Call. He's covering the debate in the House over Homeland Security spending. You can read more at rollcall.com. Thank you for the update, Tim Starks.
Thank you.
And back to the House floor live, the first of 5 amendment votes to that Homeland Security spending bill. Again, yesterday the House passed the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs spending bill. A series of amendment votes here. They'll continue debate and likely work on final passage on Thursday morning. Earlier, the House did defeat a Republican proposal to kill all the funding for the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. That was Paul Brown's amendment. He brought up the idea during amendment debate and said that by eliminating the bloated and ineffective TSA, taxpayers would immediately save about $5 billion. It was killed by a voice vote. Off the floor of the House, the 2014 defense bill is being considered by two committees. Actually, the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee meeting in a closed session for that spending bill. What's more, the Armed Services Committee has been meeting today on the marking up the 2014 Defense Authorization Bill. That is underway now, although it is likely to break for this series of votes. You can follow that live on C-SPAN 2, and that is expected to go well into the night. At the White House today, President Obama announced that UN Ambassador Susan Rice will become his national security advisor. She'll be replacing Tom Donilon, who's retiring. In a Rose Garden announcement, the president also nominated Samantha Power to be UN ambassador, a position that needs Senate approval. We'll show you the president's comments as much as we can here during the remainder of this 15-minute vote.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by Ambassador Susan Rice, Mr. Tom Donilon, and Ms. Samantha Power.
Hey, step down here. Come on down. Hey. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Please, everybody have a seat. Well, good afternoon. It is a beautiful day, and it's good to see so many friends here. Of all the jobs in government, leading my national security team is certainly one of the most demanding, if not the most demanding. And since the moment I took office, I've counted on the exceptional experience and insights of Tom Donilon. Nearly every day for the past several years, I've started each morning with Tom leading the presidential daily brief. Hundreds of times, a sweeping assessment of global developments and the most pressing challenges. As my national security advisor, his portfolio is literally the entire world. He's deftly advanced our strategic foreign policy initiatives while at the same time having to respond to unexpected crises, and that happens just about every day. He's overseen and coordinated our entire national security team across the government, a Herculean task. And it's nonstop, 24/7, 365 days a year. Today, I am wistful to announce that after more than 4 years of extraordinary service, Tom has decided to step aside at the beginning of July. And I am extraordinarily proud to announce my new national security advisor, our outstanding ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice, as well as my nominee to replace Susan in New York, Samantha Power. Now, when I first asked Tom to join my team, I knew I was getting one of our nation's premier foreign policy leaders, somebody with a deep sense of history and a keen understanding of our nation's place in the world. He shared my view that in order to renew American leadership for the 21st century, we had to fundamentally rebalance our foreign policy. And more than that, he knew how we could do it. See, Tom's that rare combination of the strategic and the tactical. He has a strategic sense of where we need to go, and he has a tactical sense of how to get there. Moreover, Tom's work ethic is legendary. He began his public service in the Carter White House when he was just 22 years old. And somehow he has been able to maintain the same drive and the same stamina and the same enthusiasm and reverence for serving in government. He's helped shape every single national security policy of my presidency, from forging a new national security strategy rooted in our economic strength here at home to ending the war in Iraq. Here at the White House, Tom oversaw the operation that led us to bin Laden, He's helped keep our transition on track as we wind down the war in Afghanistan. At the same time, Tom has played a critical role as we've bolstered the enduring pillars of American power, strengthening our alliances from Europe to Asia, enhancing our relationship with key powers, and moving ahead with new trade agreements and energy partnerships. And from our tough sanctions on Iran to our unprecedented military and intelligence cooperation with Israel, it's true. From New START with Russia to deeper partnerships with emerging powers like India to stronger ties with the Gulf states, Tom has been instrumental every step of the way. I'm especially appreciative to Tom for helping us renew American leadership in the Asia-Pacific, where so much of our future security and prosperity will be shaped. He's worked tirelessly to forge a constructive relationship with China that advances our interests and our values, and I'm grateful that Tom will be joining me as I meet with President Xi of China this week. And finally, Tom, I'm personally grateful for your advice, for your counsel, and most of all for your friendship. Whenever we sit down together, whether it's in the Oval Office or the Situation Room, I do so knowing that you have led a rigorous process, that you've challenged assumptions, that you've asked the tough questions, that you've led an incredibly hard-working national security staff, and presented me with a range of options to advance our national interests. A president can't ask for anything more than that, and this is a testament to your incredible professionalism, but also your deep love of country. I know that this relentless pace has meant sacrifices for your family, for Kathy, who's here, Dr. Biden's former chief of staff, who I was proud to nominate as our new global ambassador for women, and for Tom and Kathy's wonderful children, Sarah and Teddy. So today I want to publicly thank all the Donlins for their abiding commitment to public service that runs through the family. You've been with me every step of the way these past 4 years, and the American people owe you an enormous debt of gratitude for everything that you've done. You've helped to restore our nation's prestige and standing in the world. You've positioned us well to continue to lead in the years ahead. I think that Tom Donilon has been one of the most effective national security advisors our country has ever had, and he's done so without a lot of fanfare and a lot of fuss. So, Tom, on behalf of us all, thank you for your extraordinary service. Now, I am proud that this work will be carried on by another exemplary public servant, Ambassador Susan Rice. Susan was a trusted advisor during my first campaign for president. She helped to build my foreign policy team and lead our diplomacy at the United Nations in my first term. I am absolutely thrilled that she'll be back at my side leading my national security team in my second term. With her background as a scholar, Susan understands that there's no substitute for American leadership. She is at once passionate and pragmatic. I think everybody understands Susan is a fierce champion for justice and human dignity, but she's also mindful that we have to exercise our power wisely and deliberately. Having served on the National Security Council staff herself, she knows how to bring people together around a common policy and then push it through to completion so that we're making a difference where it matters most, here in the country that we've pledged to defend and in the daily lives of people we're trying to help around the world. Having served as an Assistant Secretary of State, she knows our policies are stronger when we harness the views and talents of people across government. So Susan's the consummate public servant, a patriot who puts her country first. She is fearless, she is tough, she has a great tennis game and a pretty good basketball game. Her brother's here, who I play with occasionally, and it runs in the family, throwing the occasional elbow, but hitting the big shot. As our ambassador to the UN, Susan has been a tireless advocate in advancing our interests. She's reinvigorated American diplomacy in New York. She's helped to put in place tough sanctions on Iran and North Korea. She has defended Israel. She has stood up for innocent civilians from Libya to Cote d'Ivoire. She has supported an independent South Sudan. She has raised her voice for human rights, including women's rights. Put simply, Susan exemplifies the finest tradition of American diplomacy and leadership. So thank you, Susan, for being willing to take on this next assignment. I'm absolutely confident that you're going to hit the ground running. And I know that after years of commuting to New York, while Ian, Jake, and Maris stayed here in Washington, you will be the first person ever in this job who will see their family more by taking the National Security Advisor's job. Now, normally I'd be worried about losing such an extraordinary person up at the United Nations and be trying to figure out how are we ever going to replace her. But fortunately, I'm confident we've got an experienced, effective, and energetic UN ambassador in waiting in Samantha Power. Samantha first came to work for me in 2005, shortly after I became a United States Senator, as one of our country's leading journalists. I think she won the Pulitzer Prize at the age of 15 or 16. One of our foremost thinkers on foreign policy. She showed us that the international community has a moral responsibility and a profound interest in resolving conflicts and defending human dignity. As a senior member of my national security team, she's been a relentless advocate for American interests and values, building partnerships on behalf of democracy and human rights, fighting the scourge of anti-Semitism and combating human trafficking. To those who care deeply about America's engagement and indispensable leadership in the world, you will find no stronger advocate for that cause than Samantha. And over the last 4 years, Samantha's worked hand in glove with Susan in her role because Samantha's been the lead White House staffer on issues related to the United Nations. And I'm fully confident she'll be ready on day one to lead our mission in New York while continuing to be an indispensable member of my national security team. She knows the UN's strengths. She knows its weaknesses. She knows that American interests are advanced when we can rally the world to our side. And she knows that we have to stand up for the things that we believe in. And to ensure that we have the principled leadership we need at the United Nations, I would strongly urge the Senate to confirm her without delay. So, Samantha, thank you to Cass and you and Declan and Rian for continuing to serve our country. This team of people has been extraordinarily dedicated to America. They have made America safer. They have made America's values live in corners of the world that are crying out for our support and our leadership. I could not be prouder of these three individuals, not only their intelligence, not only their savvy, but their integrity and their heart. And I'm very, very proud to have had the privilege of working with Tom. Very proud that I'll continue to have the privilege of working with Samantha and with Susan. So with that, I'd invite Tom to say a few words. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned the many hours that we've worked together in the Situation Room, put together here by John Kennedy without windows.
No windows.
No windows. So I would first like to thank you for this rare opportunity to be outside and experience some natural light. You also mentioned how I began my public service here under President Carter in 1977 when I was 22 years old. And I still remember leaving at the end of the day, walking up West Executive Drive past the office of then National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, and looking up at the windows of the White House, the light's always on in Zbig's office, no matter how late. And I think to myself, don't those guys ever go home? And now, these many years later, I finally have the answer. No, they don't go home very much, at least not as often or as early as their spouses and families would like. Mr. President, to serve in this capacity where we've had the opportunity to protect and defend the United States, to improve the position of the United States in the world, has been the privilege of a lifetime. To serve during your presidency, however, is to serve during one of the defining moments in our nation's history. This is because of your vision, your principled leadership, your commitment to defending our interests and upholding our ideals. Those many hours of meetings and briefings have given me the opportunity to see you as few people do, behind closed doors, away from the cameras, when a leader's character is revealed. And with your permission, I'd like to take this opportunity to share a little bit of what I've seen. First, I've seen you make the most difficult decisions a commander-in-chief can make, the decision to send our men and women in uniform into harm's way. I've seen the great care with which you have weighed these grave decisions, and I've seen your devotion to the families of our men and women in uniform. I have seen your fierce patriotism, your love of our country. When confronted with competing agendas and interests, you always bring the discussion back to one question: what's in the national interest? What's best for America? I've seen your abiding commitment to the core values that define us as Americans, our Constitution, civil liberties, the rule of law. Time and time again, you've reminded us that our decisions must stand up to the judgment of history. Finally, Mr. President, I've seen you represent the United States around the world and what you mean to the people around the world when you represent our country. When you step off that plane with the words United States of America, when you reach out to foreign audiences and speak to the basic aspirations we share as human beings, you send a clear message that America wants to be their partner. And that ability to connect, to forge new bonds is a form of American power and influence that advocates our interests and ideals as well. To Vice President Biden and Jill, Kathy and I have considered you dear friends for more than 30 years, and it's been an honor to make this journey with you. To my colleagues and friends here at the White House and across the government, the American people will never truly know how hard you work in their defense. To my longtime partners in the senior leadership of the National Security Council, Dennis McDonough, John Brennan, Tony Blinken, Lisa Monaco, Mike Froman, Ben Rhodes, and Brian McEwen, I could not have asked for better brothers or sisters in this effort. To you and all our remarkable national security staff, you're a national treasure, and every day you get up, you come here, you devote your days to keeping our country secure. You are the best our nation has to offer, and it's been an honor and a privilege to serve with each and every one of you, and I'm glad so many of you are here today. And to my friends and colleagues, Susan and Sam, congratulations. The nation is fortunate to have leaders of your intellect, compassion, character, and determination. Susan, you'll be an outstanding national security advisor. Sam, you'll be an outstanding ambassador to the United Nations, and we really appreciate your willingness to do this. Finally, and most importantly, to Kathy, Sarah, and Teddy, as the President said, this job has meant great sacrifices for you, and each of you in your own way has made a contribution to the country, and I could not be more grateful. So again, Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity, the extraordinary opportunity to serve you and to serve our nation. You know, I stand here 36 years ago, almost to the day when I first came on the 18 acres of the White House to come to work. And I must tell you, I leave this position much less cynical and never more optimistic about our country and its future. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you. Susan.
Mr. President, thank you so much. I'm deeply honored and humbled to serve our country as your national security advisor. I'm proud to have worked so closely with you for more than 6 years, and I'm deeply grateful for your enduring confidence in me. As you've outlined, we have vital opportunities to seize and ongoing challenges to confront. We have much still to accomplish on behalf of the American people, and I look forward to continuing to serve on your national security team to keep our nation strong and safe. Tom, it's been a real honor to work with you again. You have led with great dedication, smarts, and skill, and you leave a legacy of enormous accomplishment. All of us around the principal's table will miss you, and I wish you and Kathy and your family all the very best. Above all, I want to thank my own wonderful family for their unfailing support. My mother, Lois, my wonderful husband, Ian, our children, Jake and Maris, and my brother, John, have all been my strength and my greatest source of humor. I'm also thinking today about my late father, who would have loved to be here. I'm forever grateful to my family for their love and sacrifice. I want to thank my remarkable colleagues at the U.S. Mission to the United Nations. I am so proud of the work we've done together under your leadership, Mr. President, to advance America's interests at the United Nations. And Samantha, my friend, warmest congratulations. You're a tremendous colleague, and the United States will be extremely well served by your leadership at the United Nations. And I'm so glad we get to continue to work together. Mr. President, having participated in the national security decision-making process over the last 4 years, I admire the exemplary work done every day by our colleagues at State, Defense, the intelligence community, and across the government to make our nation more secure. I look forward to working closely with you, your extraordinary national security team, our country's most experienced leaders from both parties, and your superb national security staff to protect the United States, advance our global leadership, and promote the values Americans hold dear. Thank you very much. Sam.
Thank you, Mr. President. From the day I met you, and you told me that you had spent a chunk of your vacation reading a long, dark...
167, the noes are 257. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Polis of Colorado.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
And it's the second of 5 amendment votes to the 2014 Homeland Security Spending Bill. The House has been considering throughout the day. Jared Polis of Colorado with an amendment that cuts all the funding for programming allowing local law enforcement agencies to enter into agreements with the federal government to help enforce immigration laws. So 3 more amendment votes to follow and more amendment debate coming up. We expect a series of amendment votes later this evening and final passage not likely until tomorrow morning. We've also been covering throughout the day the markup session on the 2014 Defense Authorization Bill. That hearing, that markup session rather, is in a recess because of these votes on the House floor. They will gavel back in shortly, probably 5:15 or so once the votes wrap up, and we'll continue our coverage of that markup over on our companion network, C-SPAN 2.
On this vote, the ayes are 180 and the noes are 244. The amendment is not.
Is it? Mr. Palazzo.